Atlanta News First Plus starts now with the First Alert Weather Day.
Hey there, everybody. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Rodney Harris. We are in a First Alert Weather Day as you take a live look over Midtown Atlanta. You can see why. So at this point, we actually don't have a ton of rain out there in Midtown, but it is cloudy, and as you know, the rain has been off and on basically throughout the course of the morning, and it's going to continue going into the afternoon. So I actually have a new model for you, and what I want to show you is what you can expect basically for the rest of the day. So we'll have scattered rain out there this afternoon. That coverage increases after lunchtime. Marie, I'm going to switch this over so I can make it full screen. So that coverage increases later on this afternoon, and what we're starting to see is a boundary. I'm calling it a cold front, but it's really not going to drop your temperature, so I'm just going to refer to it as a boundary. But once that slides into metro Atlanta, there may be more sustained rain throughout the afternoon and evening. That's what our high-resolution models have been showing here over the past couple hours as they update. You can see that rain kind of right over metro. The reason why I'm showing you this is because if that happens, that's going to increase the rainfall rates in metro Atlanta this afternoon going into the evening. So that's something we're going to be watching for you very carefully. We are expecting scattered rain no matter what throughout the afternoon and evening, but there is a possibility that that rain could become a bit more sustained over metro Atlanta. So we'll be watching that for you carefully. Look at that, through 10 o'clock, still seeing pockets of heavy rain across North Georgia. That continues through the overnight hours, and by 4 a.m. on Friday, the heavier rain starts to shift south of Atlanta. Still some showers possible if you have to get to work super early on Friday morning. And then by 7 a.m., it should be completely dry in metro Atlanta, which is why Friday is not a First Alert Weather Day. But what I want to show you next are our updated rainfall totals. I don't think we're going to see this much rain, but I do want to show you how the concentration of rain might set up over metro. So this is an update since what I was showing you earlier this morning. At least an inch of rain is expected in metro Atlanta, maybe up to 2 inches. Again, I think this model is overdoing it a little bit, but it does show how that concentration of rain may kind of set up over metro Atlanta if our boundary stalls over the region. The reason why this is important is because I've updated your threats here a little bit. Everybody's definitely going to see rain. Some of you may see lightning this afternoon. That risk is lower, but an occasional lightning strike or two is possible. I'm not forecasting any severe weather because we've had the rain already this morning, and it helps to kind of stabilize the air. So I'm not forecasting any severe thunderstorms. However, with the concentration of rain setting up over metro Atlanta, it's not impossible to start to see some street flooding, especially this evening. That's not like a widespread flood, but if you live on a street or a road that typically floods, there's too much rain in a short period of time. That'll be possible for you, especially this evening with those rainfall rates increasing a bit over metro Atlanta. So that is something we want you to be mindful of. 100% chance of rain today. That's why we are in the First Alert Weather Day. That's going to continue through early Friday morning. And then by Friday afternoon, we're dry. If you have any plans Friday afternoon or evening, we'll be in good shape with highs in the upper 60s. By the weekend, we are in great shape. 69 is your high on Saturday, the 70s on Sunday. So whatever you have planned over the weekend, you'll be looking really good. And something that we did adjust with your forecast, we have what may be a wedge setting up across North Georgia. We talk about this every now and again. A wedge is basically when cooler air kind of moves in from the north and east, and it does a couple of things. First of all, it cools us off. So notice your high at 76 on Sunday, down to 65 on Monday, down to 57 on Tuesday. So it is cooler as we head toward Tuesday. The other thing the wedge does is that cooler air can't hold as much moisture, so it usually produces a lot more clouds. So Monday and Tuesday may be a cloudy day, and with the extra moisture, there may be some isolated showers out there Monday and Tuesday. So our pattern may change a bit kind of abruptly from the weekend, which is looking really nice, to more of a dreary, cloudy, cooler day for Monday and Tuesday. So that is something we want you to be mindful of. First Alert today, we'll keep you up to date. First Alert meteorologist Ella Dorsey will have an update on those rain rates on Atlanta News First at noon. Of course, you can always keep up to date in the First Alert weather route. But beyond today, your forecast, I promise, improves for Friday afternoon and taking you into the upcoming weekend. With a check of your headlines on this Thursday, here now is Maria.
All right, we got a lot of news to cover, so I'm going to shift things over here with Rodney in the background, and then I'll pop on your screens, and we'll jump right into it. A lot of things that we're still following that we want to bring you, and a lot of things that really started happening over the past few days that are continuing to develop. So I do believe I have myself here. Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday morning here on Atlanta News First Plus. Thanks for being with us. I'm bringing my graphics here for you, and I want to start by taking you out to breaking news that we reported to you on air this morning out in Stonecrest. Now, this was the scene of an overnight police investigation in this neighborhood. At the center of it all, one that may be linked to a nearby Emory Hillendale Hospital. Atlanta News First Don Shipman is with the First Alert breaking news tracker outside of that hospital with what we know so far.
We know that someone called 911 saying that 2 people showed up here to the hospital with gunshot wounds. We're working to get that information confirmed with DeKalb police. But I can tell you, a big police presence right around the corner from here, not too far in a subdivision. Take a look as police launch an investigation during the overnight hours. Officers cordoning off this section of Trent Walk Drive in Stonecrest. Investigators moved in and out of a townhome in the Wellington Manor subdivision. This is the 5800 block of Trent Walk, just off of Farrington Drive. Investigators collected evidence and questioned witnesses for hours. Officers first arrived right around midnight. Now, we've returned to the scene just after 4 o'clock in the morning, and officers were wrapping up and clearing out. And then we also spotted officers at Emory Hillendale Hospital. 2 patrol cars moved out of here right around 4:30 in the morning. Again, we're working to get information from DeKalb police on what was happening here at the hospital and happening inside that subdivision. Once we hear back, we'll pass that information along to you. We're here in DeKalb. Don Shipman, Atlanta News First.
And thank you, sorry about that. Thank you, Don Shipman, for that report. I do want to bring you this other breaking news, really heartbreaking news this morning. Running legend Jeff Galloway has died at the age of 80. He was a runner on the U.S. Olympic team in 1972 and the winner of the very first Peachtree Road Race. Now, Carissa Galloway says her father-in-law died from a stroke yesterday at a hospital in Pensacola, Florida. For decades, Galloway inspired elite athletes and couch potatoes around the world by promoting a run, walk, run strategy. No matter the distance, you can do it. I want to share this heartfelt statement from Atlanta Track Club. It really paints a picture of what kind of person Jeff Galloway was, and it reads, quote, Jeff has had a lasting impact on the club since 1970 when he won the inaugural Peachtree Road Race, a moment that helped shape the legacy of the race. From that historic victory to a lifetime of success in and service to the sport, Jeff's impact on running is immeasurable. A true icon in the running world, Jeff's widely known Galloway method introduced countless people across the globe to the joys of endurance-based fitness. Now, his run-walk training philosophy empowered millions, making the sport more accessible, sustainable, and welcoming for all. Not only was he a champion, he was a colleague, a coach, and a friend to so many in our community. Jeff's legacy, they go on to say, will live on in every starting line, finish line, and runner who believed they could go farther because he showed them how. He will be deeply missed. And that really just tells you everything about who Jeff Galloway was. And we, of course, here at Atlanta News First wish his family healing during this time and also share our condolences. All right, I want to talk about this next story here for bringing our Atlanta News First reporter Mary Kate Hamilton as we are following what is going to be a significant demolition today at a Camelot Condominiums community. That community, Mary Kate, has been plagued for years in South Fulton. Now the mayor says that it is time for new beginnings. So I want to check in with you. You've been there throughout the morning. Any conversation with residents who are waiting for the final hours before this past 8 years is brought to a close?
In the last 8 years or so, this building and these condominiums have really become almost notorious for crime, for fire. We have been out here countless amounts of times over the last years, I should say, reporting on those kinds of things. Now, I do want to note it's only building 9 that is being demolished today, and there are buildings all across this condominium complex, and right now we're still not exactly sure what's going to come of them. However, I spoke to someone who's on the demolition team here, and he says that he really hopes that an investor will come in, buy this property, and restore it to its former glory. That's another really interesting thing that we learned here today, that in the late 1970s, these were luxury condominiums, and someone even said that this used to be the buckhead of this area, especially for the African American community. Says the city of South Fulton, particularly this area and the Camelot Condominiums, were the prime place to be. Of course, in recent years, they have been a little bit let go, and now Building 9 finally going to be demolished. It's the first one to be demolished because a fire ripped through it in December. No one lives there at the time, but there are still residents living in condos across this complex.
And Mary Kate, if you could just pan your camera down a little bit. I think our graphics are cutting you off a little bit there. I just want to make sure the viewers can see you better. I don't know if you're able to relay that to Adam, our photojournalist here.
I am not at the moment.
Okay.
I am standing on my toes, if that can help at all.
That's fine. Okay, just want to make sure that you can be seen. We talk about all the history here at these particular condominiums. I think December of 2025 stands out specifically to me for these residents. This has just been an emotional time, and arguably this today will be extremely emotional for those that are looking at this and this place they once called home, that specific area, and saying goodbye.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In December of 2025, that massive fire that you're mentioning, it displaced 18 people. It sent 2 to the hospital. But again, it was really just the latest in a very long line of fires, of shootings here. And the residents that I spoke to today who are still living in this complex say that Building 9 being demolished is a great start, but there are other problems plaguing this community as well. And they're hoping that this is only the first step in the city of South Fulton coming in and helping this complex and these residents.
Any word from the city on what is going to be put in its place? I mean, what kind of investment in the residents there's going to be?
So not right now, and one of the things that is complicating things is that these condominiums are owned individually by the residents. So it's a little bit difficult to get to an agreement on these things. That's why the first one to be demolished, of course, has no residents living inside of it, so they were able to take that step. Now, the other problem, again, is that this is not City of South Fulton property at the moment. This is all private property, so they are trying to come to agreements with the residents, and right now, Building 9, they're looking forward to that being the first step, and then after that, they're going to see what else they can do.
Mary Kate Hamilton joining us here on ANF Plus. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking us closer to the city of South Fulton. Again, that demolition is taking place at 4 o'clock, and we, of course, will have a report from you coming up for Atlanta News First at noon. So I'm going to let you go. I do want to talk about this viral video that we're following involving a UGA professor at Atlanta News First, Yasmina Alston, covered this story for us yesterday. We continue to really monitor the developments that are coming out of this, but just to break it all down for you. Of Georgia assistant professor has been removed from campus after social media influencers accused him of pedophilia. Video of the confrontation has gone viral. We want to show you that now here at the University of Georgia campus. This is the group known as the Street Sweepers. They are an Athens group that finds people they believe are child predators. So the group, along with Atlanta social media personality Hood Anchor Ye, approached a UGA instructor with printed out screenshots of alleged inappropriate conversation he had with someone that they believed to be 14 years old. We aren't identifying the instructor at this time because he hasn't been charged with a crime. Now, I do want to bring in Atlanta News First reporter Yasmina Alston. Yasmina, you were on this story. You got a chance to talk to UGA. Can you walk us through really the details for folks that are watching this video and just scratching their head right now?
Yeah, good morning, of course. So we did contact with the University of Georgia, and they said they were aware of the video, and they called the allegations deeply disturbing. They also told us that law enforcement is involved. So we made several reaches to law enforcement. We know that the university's police department is, of course, involved in this, and the university also said that they were in communication with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And I also reached out to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, or the GBI, and they said at this time they are not involved in the case. Obviously, the university is in Athens, and we reached out to Athens Clark County Police, and they also said that at this time they are not involved in the case. Maria, we also know that the university sent an email to students and to staff, basically acknowledging that they were aware of the video and of the allegations, and that they were taking those allegations very seriously.
Yeah, not every day that you see something like this happen. And they said they removed the instructor. I'm curious what exactly they meant by that, by a suspension, a termination. Did they give any context?
No, so at this time we don't have any context. Like you said, we know that removed from the campus. Whether that means he lost his job or not is unclear at this time. As you mentioned earlier, it's important to note that this person has not been charged with crime at this time, which is why we're not identifying him. And I'm sure that's also why the university has not said if they've taken any action or if they're going to take any action when it comes to his position. So those are all still questions that we definitely need answered.
Yeah, any conversation with students or parents, I mean, you trust that an education system is going to be a safe haven for your child, and then you learn that one of the instructors, one of the staff members that are supposed to shape your child's future is accused of something like this.
And, you know, this video obviously went viral and had a ton of views and a lot of comments. And that was sort of the theme in a lot of the reaction to the video, was how just it was, if the allegations, you know, are true, because like you said, you know, it is a school, it's a university. In the video, you even see the social media influencers group walk through the classroom and also tell the students about, you know, what they believe to be true about this instructor, the allegations. So of course, there was a lot of shock and reaction on social media to what people were seeing.
Yeah.
And a lot of unanswered questions, of course.
A lot of unanswered questions. I'm curious, you know, we as journalists, we take an extra step to make sure that when we're presenting information to the public, we've vetted it, we've verified it, and we've proceeded with extreme caution. In the age of social media, news spreads around fast, whether it's been factually checked or whether it's misinformation. I'm curious, watching this as a journalist, your take on social media vigilantism. It appears that this is a kind of people taking matters into their own hands and not necessarily going through the proper chains of criminal investigations.
You know, check with law enforcement officials, and of course check with university to bring it to their attention, or if, you know, if it hasn't been brought to their attention, or just to get their response or feedback on you know, what they're seeing and what they're hearing. I think that's of course very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yasmina Alston, thank you so much for joining us. You can watch that full video, by the way, on our website, atlantanewsfirst.com, and in the free Atlanta News First app. We'll have a full breakdown and explanation of kind of what you're seeing and what we're still working to learn. And one of the stories that we continue to follow into week 2, the trial of a father accused of giving his son a firearm used in a mass shooting at Apalachee High School back in 2024. Colin Gray is facing a jury of his peers to learn whether he will be convicted of the 29 felony counts that he is facing. Our Atlanta News First, Chelsea Beimfor, has been on this story following every single day as we bring you gavel-to-gavel coverage. I want to take folks through what Day 8 looked like, everything that has happened, and how we got here to this point as we are starting to see trials shift from the prosecution's arguments into the defense's. Prosecution expecting to rest their case here this week, but today has been, again, a continuation of emotional testimony, a lot of video and picture evidence, and we're bringing you that from start to finish. Here's Chelsea's report looking at how Day 8 went, and then we'll talk about Day 9.
Go ahead and shut that spot down for him. You turn around, put your hands on your back.
On Wednesday, prosecutors played video of the moment Colin Gray was arrested by a Barrow County deputy. He is the father of the alleged Apalachee High School shooter, Colt Gray.
Why in the hell would he do this?
Colin is accused of gifting his son the rifle for Christmas that was later used in the attack, despite allegedly knowing that his son may harm himself or others.
I could feel it. I could feel what? Just his whole attitude changing.
The video was part of a 2.5-hour-long interview with Barrow County Deputy Jason Smith the day after the mass shooting. Throughout the lengthy tape, Colin appears to talk in circles, changing his answer 3 times about where guns were stored in the house, explaining why Colt had not received counseling services, and claiming he didn't know that Colt had photos of a school shooter taped to his bedroom walls.
I thought it was a guy from Green Day.
But in another interview, Colin told GBI agents he did know that Parkland, Florida school shooter Nicholas Cruz was in the photos. After hearing all of the inconsistencies in his story, Deputy Smith eventually placed Colin Gray under arrest.
You have to believe me when I tell you I never, ever, in 1,000 years, would ever think this would happen with him. Ever.
And again, as we continue to bring you coverage, you can go to our website, atlantanewsfirst.com. Also in our free Atlanta News First app under the Courts and Trials channel. You can watch ongoing coverage, again, gavel to gavel of this trial as we bring you coverage and analysis. You can join us at noon, by the way. I'll be speaking with attorney Joshua Schiffer, who will give his legal perspective on some of the evidence we're seeing being presented to the jury and what is still yet to come. Make sure you stick with us for gavel to gavel coverage there. And I want to talk about something exciting we have been working on here at Atlanta News First and across our parent company, Gray Media. Aging Untold is a new show that explores the journey of aging because as we get older, there's still so much life and connection and community to explore. I want to take you through an interview we did with one of the hosts to really break down what you can expect ahead of the premiere on March 2nd.
Hey everyone, Atlanta News First anchor Cyria Sandlin here to talk about the newest talk show on Atlanta News First, Aging Untold. Aging Untold is an exciting new project we've launched here. We are going to be sharing information with all of you at home about aging and entering this new chapter. We have all types of experts that will be joining us, a panel of hosts, and one of those hosts is joining me now. This is Sam Craddock. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your background and what you bring to the show.
So I'm a gerontologist by degree. I've worked in aging for 40 years now. Started doing just family caregiving and fell in love with our age population. Came from a culture that still respects our aging, and so I ground up as a caregiver through getting my degree as a gerontologist, owning a home care agency, an assisted living administrator, and I write books and teach and train and try and help families do better and understand their age population.
Yeah, you're very busy. And tell us a little bit about what this show and what all of us can expect from it.
So the show itself is on aging and caregiving. So what can we expect is answers for everyone. We're all aging, and we've all got somebody in our life that's in need of care, in need of some kind of assistance. Whether they know it now or they're going to need it in the future. And so we're trying to bring the answers to the table for the hard questions and the things that nobody else talks about.
Absolutely. I think there's so many topics that we want to ask about and we want to learn more about, but maybe we're just too afraid to ask those important questions to those experts. So we're bringing that to you now. And you're not alone. You've got a whole panel of co-hosts.
Yes, I do. And I have a really good group with us. So we have Dr. Ray Rogers. She's a board certified physician that was OBGYN, switched over to functional med. We have Catherine Ambrose, who is America's Senior Home Coach. She's ran a show empowering seniors for a number of years. And then Amy Cameron O'Rourke, author of The Fragile Years, and she came with a background from nursing home administrator. Wow. And so each one of us comes with our own background and our own specialty. And we come together as a group to just help families and aging population to understand what's going on.
What are some of the topics that you'll be discussing?
We're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about the topics that are taboo, from sex to incontinence to just normal aging to aging better, and how to do it a little more healthy and in a little better environment.
And one thing, obviously, that you are so familiar with, caregiving. When
Yes.
our families are aging, our loved ones are aging, a lot of us step into the role of caregiver, which can be a difficult transition for not only the caregiver, but the person receiving care who maybe had been independent for so long.
Yes. So the family dynamic and relationship of caregiving is actually the hardest job in the world. It is because you're coming in with relationship. You're coming in with relationship bias, but you're also coming in grieving. You're coming in grieving the person that you knew and the person that you've always looked up to or you've seen as a strength, and they're grieving themselves. They're grieving what they're going through. So we talk about those things. We talk about those relationships. You know, I tell people, my organization, More Than Heart, family members have the heart. They do. They have the heart to come in and do this. But it takes more than heart, because if you're just approaching it with the heart, you're going to end up frustrated. If you get the knowledge, then you can turn that frustration into dignity and respect. And so that's what we teach, is how to understand the process and what's going on from both sides.
What piece of advice would you give to someone that is maybe just starting that caregiving process?
Realize where you're both at. And I tell people all the time, you hear that expression, you know, put yourself in their shoes. Well, there's one caveat that we fail to do. Take off your shoes first. You have to take off your shoes to put somebody else's on. And stop looking at it from your perspective and truly put yourself in the position of maybe having some limitations that you didn't want to have.
Right.
And so when you can see things from their side, you're more empathetic, and you then can provide that dignity that we all deserve.
That's such good advice. And maybe for someone that is interested in the show in their 20s and 30s, and they think, oh, this isn't, pertain to me, but why should they tune in too?
Because we're all aging. We're all going to go there. We're all going to be there. If I had watched a show like this when I was in my 20s, I would have done things differently.
Wow.
I really would have paid more attention to myself as I was aging, and to the people around me. So we're all there. We all have a grandparent. We all have a parent. We all have somebody that we can look up to, and somebody that's older in our lives. And the reality is, it's the only place that we have a prejudice and a bias against the place we're all headed.
Wow.
We're all headed there.
And I think with this show, you're going to be giving people a lot of advice to make sure they live a very long and healthy life.
Yes, we're going to try. You make your choices, and genetics make their choices. But yes, we want to give the tools to do things a little differently, maybe to live a healthier life. But what we really want to focus on is the quality. If you can't have perfect health, you can still have high quality, and we want to focus on that.
And just lastly, what is your overall goal for this show?
My overall goal is to help family members and aging population understand what's going on and to bring dignity and empathy to all.
That is so important.
Yeah.
Looking forward to watching the show.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us, and you can watch Aging Untold on Atlanta News First and Atlanta News First Plus.
Thank you, Cyria. As we are counting down, again, March 2nd is when you're going to want to put that on your calendar, 4 p.m. right here on Atlanta News First and Atlanta News First Plus. But as you can see, I got a little bit ahead of myself. We are continuing to follow the lasting impacts reactions from the President's State of the Union address that happened earlier. Now, we took you from start to finish through his remarks, through some of the Democratic reactions. We wanted to take the time to really break down some of what was said, both reflecting on the Trump administration's first year in this second term in office, as well as some of what the president said about his plans for the future. I want to toss it out to Atlanta News First, Rick Folbaum and Doug Reardon for our midweek update of On the Record.
Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
On Tuesday, the president delivered his State of the Union. The applause lines have faded, the cable chyrons are gone, the spin rooms are quiet, and now the real question, did any of it matter? I'm Rick Fulbaum here along with my colleague Doug Reardon. Thanks so much for joining us here on ANF Plus. We are the hosts of Atlanta News First on the Record. And over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about the president's speech. Not the highlights, you probably have already seen them. We're going to talk about the things that really matter at this point, the numbers. What has the reaction been like? What are voters saying about this? And what does it mean as we head into the November midterm elections, which are very, very important, of course. So, Doug, let's get started here, because if you look at some of the approval ratings for this president heading into the speech and over the last couple of weeks, he really entered the room, the chamber, with an uphill climb because voters are really, according to the polls, and this is not just one poll, this is all polls for the most part, from you name it, NPR to Fox News, show that the president's approval numbers are underwater. And even on the issues that helped him win re-election, immigration and the economy, voters are just not liking what they're seeing from this president.
Right. And when you talk about those approval rating numbers, they're the lowest that Trump has ever seen. So by most standards, we're seeing him at around 36% job approval, which for any president is not great. And I will point out, as our political expert, Dr. Bette Taylor, did the night of that speech, that it's even worse among independent voters. You have only about 27% of independent voters that think he's doing a good job, and only about 25% of them think he's paying attention to the most important issue the way he should be, which is the economy. And so that was what Trump ran on, and I think he did a really good job running on the economy, saying, I'm going to come in and I'm going to fix this and I'm going to fix that. And while we are seeing some pretty steady job numbers and some pretty low inflation numbers compared to what we've seen in the past 4 or 5 years, he can't run on it anymore. He has to actually have some action behind his words now. And I think that was what we're lacking for a lot of people, not only in that speech, but in his policies as well. Big blow to the Trump administration. About 4 days before that speech came, it was the tariff decision from the Supreme Court, and he really gave it to sort of the Supreme Court justices who are sitting just a couple of feet away from him that night. That was really the cornerstone of his economic policy, and something that he thought would be kind of the key in the lock for everything he promised voters on the economy. It's not panned out that way. We've talked to a lot of business owners. We're very upset by the way tariffs have impacted their workflow and their supply chains. Certainly, even out at the Trump rally in Rome, we talked to one woman who was a florist and said, I had the worst Valentine's Day that I've ever had in my 20 years of doing this. And she was wearing a red MAGA hat. So, this is affecting all people. And I think what he failed to do was kind of put some teeth to the policies he's been talking about and show voters how they actually are impacting their lives in a positive way. Because I think the most people, they're not feeling positivity out of these, out of these policies. And so, I think what was the most important thing to come out of that speech was what was not said, and that was the president really addressing some of the positive impacts of his economic policies.
And we've seen this with other presidents over the years, sort of a disconnect between what the president is saying and what the electorate is feeling. And that seems to be what happened the other night, because while Americans, like those that you have just cited, are talking about the hardships that they are still facing when it comes to affordability, a word that the president mentioned again that he doesn't really like and thinks that it's a made-up word by Democrats. But when it comes to their ability to go to the supermarket and buy the things that they need, that their family needs, with food and medicine and you name it. They're having real struggles with that. A lot of voters are. And yet there was no acknowledgement of that from President Trump. No, I feel your pain, the way that Bill Clinton was so famously said years ago back in the 1990s. It was America is winning. America is winning like never before. We're going to keep on winning. And I just wonder if that was a smart approach. Maybe his base didn't need reassurance of those things, but the independent voters that you mentioned, the ones that will likely decide these midterm elections that are coming up in November, they really might have wanted to hear the president say, hey, I know that there are still problems out there, and this is what we're doing about it.
Right. And that was who he should have been speaking to. It's a tough position for the president, right? Because you really haven't made as much ground as you maybe are claiming to have made, or as maybe people see out in the real world on the economy. But you do have a midterm election coming up, and it's a midterm where we know Republicans are facing really strong headwinds in some of the seats they're running. We have 4 seats here in Georgia that are open. They're all GOP seats. And so a tough position for the president. You don't want to get up there and say, hey, it's not as good as we thought it was going to be, but hey, vote Republican in, the primaries. It's a tough thing to do. But certainly it doesn't matter because people are still feeling this pinch. And when the president was in Rome just a couple of weeks ago in that 14th district, he was saying, I beat affordability. It's not an issue anymore. Don't worry about it. Go ask any consumer and they'll tell you it is still very much an issue between rent prices, healthcare prices, grocery prices. The only time I heard the president say anything that was acknowledging things are still kind of in the weeds was when he said, we're working on beef prices. Just hang with us, bring it down a little bit. We're working on that. I wish, and I think a lot of people wish that he had done that on even more issues when we talk about housing prices, when we talk about the price of big goods like cars. I will talk about, of course, the cost of healthcare, especially in Georgia, where 1.4 million people just kicked out their ACA subsidies. I think people really wanted to hear a little bit more substance and maybe, to your point, a little bit more understanding that things are not exactly where they need to be. Realistically, do inflation numbers impact you on a day-to-day basis? Do job numbers impact you on a day-to-day basis? If you have a job, not really. And so I don't think that that was a wide appeal for the president. And you really heard it in the Democratic response. Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger saying, is the president working for you? He's not. He's working to enrich himself. Like you said, his base probably doesn't feel that way. Probably treat you Republicans, Democrats, or ought to be Democrats. But that independent middle vote that really, as you said, swings elections, they certainly wanted to hear more substance out of that speech instead of all the back patting that I think we heard.
I wonder, how much social media plays into the way that people received the president's speech the other night. Because while everyone might have been able to watch the same speech, they most likely went to very different algorithms on their social media feeds. We know that if you are a conservative voter, you are most likely getting a feed that is full of conservative viewpoints, people who are going to be in favor of what the president said and applaud the way that he said it. While if you are a liberal, a Democrat, and those are the sites that you typically go to, your algorithm is going to be completely different. And it's going to talk about how terrible the president's speech was and how he didn't address any of the problems that Americans are facing. And so, you see people walking away from this address, most likely in the same place that they were before the speech was delivered.
Yeah, I don't think in the course of history, State of the Unions have really swayed anyone's mind. There's been varying levels of bluntness with different presidents. You mentioned Bill Clinton, I believe back in 1994, gave his address, and it was, fairly straightforward. To my knowledge, Gerald Ford is the only one to get up there and say the State of the Union is not good, right? And of course, that was fairly obvious. We were coming out of Watergate, we were coming out of Vietnam War, things were really tough. But especially Trump, we know the showman he is. We know he's always going to play up to the things that he has done right. And so, yeah, I don't think the State of the Union is an equal for a ton of people. But for those independents, it was, I think, a chance for him to do the right thing by them and kind of acknowledge some of the things that, are making life difficult for people. Most of what I've seen on social media, as it always is every year when we have instances like this, is the back and forth between the Democrats and the president. I will note, too, that when we got a copy of that speech, when he had pointed to the Democrats and said, these people are crazy, that was a scripted lie. It was actually in his speech. And so there was definitely, some agitation. There was an element of that, I think, to this speech, certainly. And when you look at the actual copy of it, you can see that there was definitely some campaigning going on with the president saying, Democrats are crazy. We don't want them in office. That was a clear message to me to say for a Republican in these primaries and when they're around. So, yeah, I wouldn't put too much stock in the social media fallout if I were anyone. I would simply pay attention to how your life is going right now.
You mentioned Gerald Ford, who famously did not win another term after he made that declaration at the State of the Union address that the State of the Union was not good. So no surprise that we haven't heard other presidents mimic that approach because they want to win their elections, obviously. So that's right. Okay, so here we are, and we're looking at what is becoming a shorter and shorter runway for the Republicans to be able to turn things around. Not only reality, but also with their messaging, and try to convince voters who are, as we've been discussing, still feeling the effects of the economy, and get them feeling a little bit better as they get set to head to the ballot box. Historically speaking, the party in power, the party that's in the White House, loses seats in midterm elections. That's the way it goes most of the time. But we could be looking at something that is a lot more like a bloodbath, a thumping, as George W. Bush mentioned after his party lost a lot of seats during the midterm, during one of his terms. It could be a really, really big night for the Democrats if the Republicans are not able to get it together. So what do they have to do?
Yeah, I mean, you see it again, just to raise that point. This is not uncommon to see these small to medium to even large swings in the balance of power in the House and Senate during midterms. No one, we're Americans. We always want more, right? And so there's always this dissatisfaction with the current administration. If people aren't making enough money, if people, don't have the amenities they need in life, whatever the case may be. We saw with the Obama administration, even when he had incredibly high approval ratings, there was that really bad midterm that they had where they lost control of the House and Senate. And it really stifled the Obama administration's ability to do things. And we could see that with the Trump administration if the midterms go the way we think they will. And we can look back, and we talked about this 1,000 times, but it bears weight. The PSC elections here in Georgia, and that was a heavily Republican board. It had been for decades, in fact. And we saw 2 Democratic members overtake Republican challengers or incumbents in those races. We also saw a couple House districts here, one in Acton that was reliably red, flip blue as well. And so, I think for Republicans, it is very much crunch time. They've really got to start messaging the right way. We're having Mike Collins, for example, on the show this weekend. He's up against a very tough incumbent in John Ossoff. And, I think they're starting to feel the pinch a little bit. But I will note, too, that, to give Trump some credit, he has been able to circumvent Congress on a number of different days. Inside a lot of executive orders, he has been able to work razor-thin majorities in his favor. And it's like the big, beautiful bill over the summer, in instances like the government shutdown. Right. And so, I don't know if Trump is necessarily concerned about little swings. I think he's concerned about really big swings that would actually allow Democrats to have more power than just holding out on Republicans.
It's so interesting because the president is about to enter his lame duck phase, which is the term that's given to a president whose time in office is finite. He cannot run for another term. And so we know that these are the waning days of the Trump presidency. And when that's the case, you end up seeing a lot of times lawmakers in that president's party begin to distance themselves and not necessarily tote the line that the White House would like them to. And it'll be very interesting to see as we get closer to the primaries and these midterms in November, whether Republicans who have really stood by President Trump's side with good reason, whether that will change at all, whether we'll start to hear some dissenting voices like we did from Marjorie Taylor Greene before she announced her resignation from Congress. Might there be other Republicans who are in tough races who may decide that it's more important for them to talk to voters in a way that they really feel that they can connect with them, as opposed to the way that President Trump would like them to.
Right. And that's a tough line to walk, right? Because Trump is the de facto head of the Republican Party, not even de facto, he's just the head of the Republican Party. While his endorsement certainly is helpful, it is not the gold standard. It does not bear weight 100% of the time. We're seeing that in cases like Kelly Loeffler or Herschel Walker losing their Senate seats to Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. So, I think it's safer than people might think if you're a Republican to break with the president, but nobody really seems to want to do that. And I think it's an important question for constituents to ask: how do you reconcile this difference between the president saying everything's fine and affordability is not an issue, and the way you're living your day-to-day life? Those are the questions that, of course, we and other constituents need to be asking these candidates to make sure that they are not just going to fall in line with policy that could be harmful to their own constituency. A good example is Marjorie Taylor Greene, like you mentioned, saying, yeah, I mean, Republicans don't like the ACA, but I got a lot of constituents that use the subsidies, including members of her own family.
That's right.
Of course, that led to that famous break. And so while I don't think it'll be kind of a widespread effect, I do think that you will start to see some Republicans maybe back off just a little bit. Kind of an extreme example, but at the end of the first Trump administration, we had January 6th, where you had people like Lindsey Graham putting his hands up and saying, I'm out. That's it for me. And of course, they came right back and supported him in his second run. So, and whether or not it holds, I think you will start to see some Republicans maybe not outrightly distance themselves from Trump, but start to talk a little bit more about what we didn't hear at the State of the Union address, which was, we know it's tough. We're working on it. We got your back type of thing. Barry Loudermilk was a very surprising instance of this, where he decided not to run for re-election in a district that, let's be real, he probably would have won any time he decided he wanted to run that race, and he's not doing it. And so, this is an interesting position for Republicans. We have 4 open seats here in Georgia, all EOP seats, and I think they just need to start messaging to their constituents instead of the president.
You mentioned the Congressman Loudermilk, who has dropped out. There are a record number of members of Congress, sitting members of Congress, who have announced either that they're not running or that they're running for other seats. We talked about the Public Service Commission elections here in Georgia, and I remember talking to our political experts and analysts at the time, asking, is this going to be a bellwether? Here it is, it's a race. These are seats that are typically not marquee races that voters pay a lot of attention to. But in light of the fact that these were Republican seats that both flipped on the Public Service Commission, Democrats began to sort of feel confident about themselves. You mentioned Mike Collins, who's going to be on the record with us this coming Sunday. Let's talk about that race against Senator Ossoff and some of the other races that we're facing here in Georgia, which could be bellwether races. Of course, we also have the special election for Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat in Georgia 14, where President Trump has made an endorsement in that race, endorsing Clay Fuller, who says that he is the guy who is going to be with President Trump 100% of the way. So no deviating for Clay Fuller at this point. But what happens if someone like Sean Harris, who is a retired brigadier general, a farmer in Northwest Georgia, someone who has run for that seat and lost previously to Marjorie Taylor Greene, but who seems to have some supporters on the ground there, even amongst some Republicans, if you believe him? What happens if this primary, this special election, rather, if voters go to the polls in Georgia 14, and we don't see the president's choice amongst the top couple of vote getters, or we see a Democrat squeaking by and getting in with the possibility of winning a contest and winning a seat that has been in Republican hands for a long time.
Yeah, I think there are actually 2 races that can be bellwethers here. It's actually not the Senate race, because Trump has not made an endorsement in that yet. And so we don't get to really test that unless he changes his mind and decides to do that before the primary. I think the 2 races you're going to want to look at, see how this goes, because we will have an indication before voters go to the polls in November, and we get to test 2 Trump endorsements, is that special election, right? We'll know that very soon, whether or not Clay Fuller and Donald Trump can hold enough, of the voters' trust and attention to actually get out of Clay Fuller.
March the 10th is that.
10th is coming up, and we'll know, that night whether or not Trump's endorsement carries the gold standard in that race. But yeah, Clay Fuller certainly has not been doing as well as you would think in some of these straw polls. Of course, they're not the most accurate thing in the world, but that's at these forums and these debates that we're having, where these straw polls are being taken, that is kind of a good microcosm of the Republican base in those areas. And we're seeing candidates like Tom Gray and former state senator Colt Gray do really well in those straw polls, even finishing above Clay Fuller. And so that could be an indicator that, even just in that Republican primary, and of course, Sean Harris, the Democrat, will be on the ballot as well. So we'll get a good sense of what voters in that district are thinking, and thereby I think, how the Republican base feels about Trump's candidates and kind of the policies that ride on his coattails. So That's one I think it'll be interesting. And by the way, you mentioned Sean Harris and Republican support. It's interesting. We heard the one of the party chairs in the 14th district say she was not happy about the signs. When you drive around Rome, you see Republicans for Harris signs. I've never seen that before. And so, I think that that could be an interesting race, not only to tell if Trump's endorsement really matters in these things, but also if Republicans are losing ground in a place that was a really strong hold for them. The other race is actually in the governor's race in that primary because Trump has made an endorsement in that race. It's Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, and that's going to be coming up soon as well. But there are a lot of strong candidates on that Republican side in the primary. You have the Attorney General, Chris Carr. You have Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. And then, of course, you have Burt Jones. And you have new entry, Rick Jackson, the healthcare billionaire who's really made a splash in this race when he was running.
I think I might have seen one of his campaign ads.
Yeah, one or two. Yeah. I'm sure you have. I'm sure everybody has. But, he's an interesting candidate strictly because he is also very much in that Trump vein. Now, Trump, of course, has endorsed Lieutenant Governor Jones. We were interested when we went out to Rome for that rally to see if the president might be a little soft on Jones in terms of maybe an indicator that he might want to switch his endorsement. And so his endorsement, he was not. He was full in on Burt Jones. Burt Jones has been a huge ally to the president here in Georgia. He has helped shepherd a lot of his federal policies through the state Senate at the state level, things like Department of the DOJ Department for Government Efficiency. Jones led a version of that in the state Senate. We've seen a lot of income tax movement from Jones that, we know is something the president has encouraged state leaders to do as well. And so, I think if Burt Jones were to lose that primary or not do as well as he's expected to, that could be interesting as well because Trump has really stood behind Jones this entire time. And if you see a candidate like Brad Raffensperger or like Rick Jackson, best Burt Jones in that primary, that's going to be very telling for Republican voters too, that maybe the base is off of what the president has in mind for them.
And on the Democratic side, we should mention this week saw another Democrat drop out of the race, Roa Roma, state lawmaker, or Rua Roma, pardon me. She announced that she is dropping out of this race in order to focus on another contest. But if we look at the Democrats, polls seem to show former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms as the front runner in that race. But Jason Estevez is still out there. He's got some money to spend. What's your take as we look at the Democratic field in this race for Georgia governor?
So it's no surprise to me at all that Keisha Lance Bottoms is leading these polls. She's very recently removed from Georgia politics as the mayor of Atlanta. She had a very tumultuous term there with all the things that went on kind of right before COVID and right during that very tough time for any elected official to navigate. So her name recognition is through the roof. Not surprised that people are going to these polls, looking at the list of candidates. Some people just vote with their eyes. That's what it is. And so I think certainly that Mayor Bottoms is playing to that and had really benefiting from that. People don't necessarily know folks like Jason Estevez unless you live in DeKalb County or you were around when he was labor commissioner. People don't necessarily know who Mike Thurmond is and all of the things that he's done for the Democratic Party and for Georgia. And so, and don't get me wrong, Keisha Lance Bottoms is an incredibly strong candidate. She's a savvy politician. She was fairly well liked when she was in office, and she's got great name recognition. So no surprise there. I think it's just going to come down to what happens with the runoff. Will she be able to get more than half of voters to approve her as the candidate? That's a tough thing to do in Georgia. And when you're talking, I think it's at this point, just looking at polling numbers, it's going to be Keisha and it's going to be somebody else. It's just a question of who that other person is.
And if you talk about Keisha Lance Bottoms, who obviously has the name recognition, she also has some baggage. She did not run for another term, and a lot of people are wondering why she didn't do that. Some even calling her a quitter for having left after just one term as mayor in Atlanta. But then, of course, there were attempts that she made to try to join the the Biden administration, that she was really not able to get the job that she wanted. She did end up getting a sort of a low-level advisory job within the Biden administration. But her connections to Joe Biden would really open the door for any Republican who wins in the primary to just go after her, tying her to a presidency that a lot of people, even a lot of Democrats now view as a failed one.
Yeah, it's tough because those are the things that voters pay attention to. They really do. It is an uphill battle for her in terms of opposition because she's had the most time as a politician. She served at, arguably besides Mike Thurman being labor commissioner, she's served at the highest level for any of these Democratic candidates. And so you're getting a lot of exposure that also comes with a lot of baggage. People are very upset with the way that she handled COVID and also some of the Sequoia Turner fallout when that young girl was killed in the early days of those protests after the killing of George Floyd. And so there is a lot to go after Keisha Lance Bottoms on, no question about it. If you serve as mayor, even for one term of Atlanta, you're going to accumulate a little bit of baggage. But certainly for her, she was there in a tough time. And there's a lot for Republicans to go after. But don't forget, besides Rick Jackson in that Republican side, there is a lot to go after with these other candidates as well, between Burt Jones, especially Brad Raffensperger. No matter how you feel about the way he handled the fallout of the 2020 election, there are a lot of Democrats who could say he could have done more. There are a lot of Republicans who said he could have done more just the opposite way.
Right. To help the president.
Exactly. And so everybody's got their baggage. It's going to be a very dirty primary. We've already seen the attack heads running each, within the GOP primary. It's been especially bruising. So I would say just buckle up because everyone's going to go after it.
Good advice. Well, we appreciate you watching and listening to us today. Of course, On the Record airs Sundays at 11 on Atlanta News First. You can also find it streaming anytime, anywhere on ANF Plus, which you can find on all of our streaming platforms. Again, Mike Collins coming up this weekend. We've got some great analysts who are going to come in and break it all down for us. And we'll continue the discussion as we head towards the special election in Georgia 14, the primaries, and then the general elections in November. A lot of politics to talk about, and we appreciate you joining us. We'll see you soon right here on ANF.
Thank you for watching ANF Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and your community stories, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch us on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. To join the conversation on YouTube Live, visit our channel and hit subscribe. You can also listen to the Atlanta News First podcast by searching Atlanta News First on your preferred listening platform.